Startup experience, growing
people,
improvement, knowledge, ideas, teamwork,
motivation,
fulfillment.
Hello. Welcome to the launch day of Futurepreneurs 2021. I'm really sorry for starting late. We had some technical issues, but now we're here. So, my name is Julia. I'm the coordinator of Futurepreneurs, and I will be your host today. As you can see, we are launching the program the same way as the finished Futurepreneurs 2020, in an empty venue without our participants, speakers, or our friends. The global pandemic has turned our world upside down. However, the importance of sustainability is only rising. If you are new here, Futurepreneurs is sustainability promoting pre-accelerator organized by Sunrise Valley Science and Technology Park since 2017. Since then, we have already trained 500 people, and we are going to train more. This year, we turn our program 100% virtual, which allows us to connect participants, trainers, and mentors from different cities and even countries. Of course, running the program wouldn't be possible without our dear partners. I would like to say a big thank you to each and every one of those for getting involved in many different ways. Now, I would like to invite the CEO of Sunrise Valley Science and Technology Park, Laima Kaušpadienė, to join our virtual spotlight and welcome you all. Laima, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Julia, and hello, Futurepreneurs. I'm so excited to welcome you. And every year we start every edition with a short video, the one that you saw a minute ago. And in the video, you can see our alumni, the very first Futurepreneurs. And each of them names the main takeaways, the main keywords from the program, how they perceived it. And they associate it with the startup, with the experience, growing people, improvement, knowledge, ideas, motivation, teamwork, and fulfillment. But the main thing is that the program is all about sustainability. The Sustainable Development Goals established by United Nations, goals that are dedicated to a self-societal, economical, environmental, and other challenges. And it is so amazing that this year we had more than 230 applications. So many people are ready to tackle these challenges. And so many of you who want to create not just a business, to develop not just an idea, but to create sustainable business, the one that is good for our planet, the one that is good for our society. And I want to thank you for choosing the way of impact-driven entrepreneur, or at least trying to become one. Either way, the Futurepreneurs pre-accelerator will be a great experience for you. And I believe that you cannot wait to dive into presentations and team working. So I will just wish you all the best of luck. And may these 2 coming months will be full of fun, full of experience, co-creation, motivation, and fulfillment. Good luck.
Thank you, Laima. Thank you for joining us here today. And before we connect with our first speaker, I would like to encourage you all to get involved. Please take your phones and go to slido.com and enter the code FTPR2021. During the upcoming presentations and the discussion, you will be able to ask questions there. Now, without any further ado, let's see how everyday life will look like in 2050s. Our first speaker is a creative strategist, positioning and pitch coach, and a storyteller. He is also putting together his own fund, Actnow Ventures, with a vision to invest in building a better world. Ladies and gentlemen, Wallace Green.
Hello, everyone. I just in time managed to turn off my mute.
Wallace, we cannot hear you.
I'll try that again. What was it? The most popular phrase in 2020 was "your mic is off." I hope my mic is on now. Good morning, everyone. I'm Wallace Green. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to tell a little bit about my story in the presentation, but before I start, I just want to say a quick thank you to the organizers of this event for inviting me, Litban CoInvest. That's Victoria, Julia, and Laima from the Science and Technology Park. It's great to meet you all. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. When Julia asked me if I would speak to the event, there was not a moment of hesitation for me to say yes, because this is a really important time period that we're going through. And I'm really happy that somebody gives me an opportunity to share my point of view on the road forward. So without further, I'll jump into my presentation, which eventually I'm going to get to a day in the life in the year 2050. Now let's see if my slides will cooperate. So 2020, there was one thing in 2020 that became extremely abundant and apparent to all of us, and that was that we had time. And here's how I spent a lot of that time. I spent it reflecting on my life, looking back, looking at what I have had at that time during 2020, and really thinking about the future, because what we see in the media is deeply disturbing. But I'm an optimist. And when I saw this Keeling curve with this pro forma look from 2020 moving out to 2050, showing us what the future could look like in a potential drawdown scenario, I saw that and said, well, that's the roadmap, isn't it? Isn't that what we're going for? Isn't that the goal? And so that's something I thought a lot about in 2020. And I've kind of re-engineered my whole way of thinking around the next 30 years as a drawdown journey. But the question is, what the heck has to happen for us to make that future reality come to fruition? And before we get there, I want to just reflect back, because to predict what the next 30 years is going to look like, I don't know, maybe a healthy way to do that would be to look backwards for 30 years and try and remind myself about how change happens in life. Well, around 30 years ago, I was at the beach with my family, and I was a young engineer straight out of mechanical engineering school, working in the energy conservation business, which was you know, kind of a niche thing back in that day. By the way, that's me there in the middle. I'm from Tennessee, so I'm an American guy, and I live in Prague. And one of the reasons I came over here was because around the time from the previous picture, I'd heard about what was going on. I was watching the news, and there was so much change happening in Central East Europe that it caused me great excitement. And so I eventually moved to Europe 20 years ago, and I've been here ever since. And it's this theme of change, and especially the winds of change. Gosh, every time I hear the song by the Scorpions, it gives me chills. And it seems so prescient that today we're also facing these both literal and figurative winds of change with the changes in our climate, and also just the way that we get along or don't get along with the planet. And we know that a lot needs to change. Well, you know, if you think about the next coming 30 years, how transformative will that period be? And we look back, we see that with the emergence of China, 25,000 kilometers of high-speed rails were installed in China just in 2020. So, sorry, in the period of 2008 to 2018. So in a 10-year period, you know, can you imagine connecting all those people and all those different parts of that country, how transformative that must have been? Then we have our, you know, massive population growth and change in cities like Mumbai, which grew from 12 million people in 1990 to 20 million today. Shanghai, just look at the development, thinking of all the concrete. Now, why am I showing you these huge transformative changes in this short period of time? Is because we're relating it then back to the Keeling curve. So we know that through all these massive development periods in these major cities, oh my God, not to mention the fact that the iPhone was launched in 2007 and has sold 2.2 billion handsets to date. What we're experiencing here is like, you could almost say it's Moore's law of universal change, which says that the number of transistors on a circuit doubles every year, essentially doubling the capacity. You know, in 2020, with all this time sitting at home, observing time and reflecting back and looking at the challenges that we face, it filled me with excitement because the next 30 years are, I mean, it's going to be unimaginable. But we've got to do it differently. So much has to change. In a sense, our general relationship with the biosphere isn't working. The linear relationship, the values of extraction and incessant growth, leading our countries based on an unsustainable GDP measurements, we know this doesn't work. And the better way is to somehow change our actions in the marketplace as consumers, as politicians, as citizens, so that we align with the systems in which we live. Now, I'm going to take a huge risk here of embarrassment, and I'm going to look ahead. So here we are, it's 2021. We have a 2050 carbon neutrality objective in the European Union. The European Union is investing 1 trillion euros to facilitate that transition to clean energy and sustainability and carbon neutrality in a 30-year period. In addition to that, there's somewhere close to 2 trillion euros being injected into the European market to support the post-COVID economic recovery. Looking ahead right now, there is this giant wind of capital blowing through Europe. This will accelerate our change to, I think almost unimaginable change. And it's got to be in a way that makes sustainable living for everyone. So the question is, what is this next 30 years going to look like? Now, here's my story. Let's take a trip into the future. Now, there's some context here to this future. This future is the 22nd of April, 2050. And if there are any ecologists or nature lovers out there, you know that this is Earth Day. And it's Earth Day year 80. Earth Day was started in 1970. The context here is we're going to step forward a little bit more, all the way to the 22nd of April, which incidentally is a Friday. And I'm existing at that moment in time where you see this little geo marker, and this is my home in Prague. And here's what I'm going to do on this day. I'm going to go for a run. It's 2050. I'm almost 82 years old. I still live in Prague in the 6th district, which is an historic district in Prague. My building that I live in was built in 1920. So even my building is 130 years old, but I'm still living here. And there's something that I haven't given up in spite of all the challenges that we all faced for the last 30 years, is I'm not giving up my morning run, even though I'm 82. So here's the world that I can imagine that I'm living in at this moment in time. I step out the door. What's my first reaction? The first thing I do is I step out and I take a deep breath. It's 6 a.m., by the way. I'm a morning runner. Take a deep breath of clean air. And I feel intense gratitude that the air is clean. Why is it clean? Because we're on clean energy. Because the carbon neutrality, the penalties, the sticks and the carrots that the governments put forward helped us get off dirty energy onto clean energy. Then while I'm stretching, I'm going to look to my left and I'm going to look to my right. And what am I going to see? I want to see lots and lots of trees. Why trees? Because we have to plant trees early so that those trees can grow to maturity and pull carbon. But trees are not just an aesthetic in 2050. Trees are functional. They're the most efficient carbon suckers in the planet. And there was a big push over a 30-year period to basically greenify all areas of cities. Now, there's a reason why we had more areas in the cities to greenify, is because we made the transition to electric vehicles. And the idea of personal ownership of those vehicles essentially melted away. We still have private ownership of vehicles, but in 2050, come on, you need transport, it comes to you. Does it have a driver? This is 30 years from now. Of course it doesn't. So when you need a vehicle, it comes to you. Well, what did that do? It freed up lots and lots of parking spaces. So parking spaces in residential areas are now public spaces, and there are lots and lots of trees planted. Now, it's not just Prague. All over the world, there were massive movements to put trees everywhere. And because of that, we had a return to the natural wildlife in those trees. So it's April 2050, and I'm stretching, and I'm about to go for my run, and I hear lots and lots of birds singing. Now, as I start my jog through my neighborhood, I'm going to reflect back on some of the things that have happened in the last 30 years. This is the world I want to live in, folks. Energy is clean, but I don't see it. Every tile on every roof, every window in every building is grabbing energy from the sun, and it's putting it into batteries that store our all-electric lives. Vehicles snake in and out of streets quietly, efficiently, autonomously. And because that, cities are extremely safe and highly efficient and affordable. Here's another big change as I'm jogging, getting closer to Stromovka Park in my neighborhood, is as I see the forest in front of me get closer, I start to think about the value in all those trees. Because over the last 30 years, the world has made a transition into a world of the carbon economy. When carbon became the most precious commodity, everybody wanted it. So people pulled it from the sky. They pulled it through their trees. They harvested in their roots. But the irony of carbon is some of it we needed to use for new materials and clean fuels. Others we just needed to put it away. And in the carbon economy, people got paid to pull, they got paid to store, and lots of services popped up to ensure that carbon was being properly sequestered over time and that we were really making the drawdown happen functionally. In addition to this, all kinds of startups had to create new types of economic modeling software so that companies could rejig their business models to take advantage of stored carbon. Because now, every time a building gets built, stored carbon becomes not a liability or a cost, but an asset. Another part of this world is I'm 82 almost, and I'm taking a morning run through my park. One of the reasons is because food is extremely nutritious. Why? Because we completely re-engineered our relationship with soil. Oddly enough, one of the reasons we're in the hole we're in today is because big ag has disconnected us from soil. And soil, just like the rest of our biosphere, is a living, breathing entity. There are more living organisms in a teaspoonful of soil than there are people living on the planet. But today we grow our food in dirt. And it's through uses of technologies like biochar, by neutralooping, taking the waste food from our human consumption patterns, processing it and providing that as food back to the soil. Carbon farming and carbon farmers becomes a new reality. Small farmers who previously scrapped by producing their small harvests, now they get paid to sequester carbon. So as long as there are systems to measure their carbon content in soil, they're getting paid. So food producers also become carbon producers. As I'm running through my neighborhood, I want to be able to see people that I know and feel connected to my community. And innovators have come out in the hundreds of thousands in cities all around the world to create not just startup businesses, but small community movements to do things that create a sense of connection in communities, whether they're for nonprofit or whether they're for-profit businesses. And because the climate crisis was so pervasive around the world, young people could get a job planting trees or learning about biodiversity or learning about regenerative agriculture. It's extremely exciting what the new president is doing in the US with this Climate Conservation Corps. This is what I mean in 2050. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute. Meanwhile, 30 years of conscious shift in our consumerism and our respect for nature has led to wildlife and habitat regeneration. It's the pastime that everybody shares around the planet. And underneath all of these activities, we have extreme bioscience data. I imagine in a world of 2050, there's a new unicorn that's developed basically SAP, ERP system to manage the natural resources on the planet. So we know how much carbon is being sequestered. We know how much carbon is accounted for in our systems in the atmosphere, that we know the number of trees that are being planted and the amounts of fresh water. All of this supported by rigorous data science so we can continue to tweak and find balance in our relationship with the planet. But underneath all of this, it's got to be built on a foundation of a collective shared purpose. I see the next 30 years as I'm running through the forests as really an opportunity for all of us to see that we really do share one planet and that we're all brothers and sisters and there's opportunity for everyone. If you really want to get excited like I am, you'll start reading a new genre called climate fiction. Some of it is really dark and some of it is really hopeful. But in my world of 2050, I'm an almost 82-year-old guy with a super fit body and a super clean mind, living in a very simple, dignified world where everybody lives in harmony. And you know what? If we can build cities out of deserts, if we can build high-speed rails in a decade that cover an entire nation of over 1 billion people, then we can do this. So how did we get here? Here's the tough one. There are no simple and easy answers. But this thing, like all great projects, it has to be engineered at a systems level. No single startup can make it happen. I believe that collaboration is going to trump competition. Companies that would previously in markets have been competing, they need to combine forces because this is a mission-driven effort over the next 30 years. And we have to make a choice because our future is either we adapt to scenarios which are very challenging, or we do what we do best, which is pull out a rabbit out of a hat, put a man on the moon in less than a decade, build cities anywhere in the world, and we regenerate our relationship with Mother Earth. And here's the call to action. This is a hands-on deck call. There's room for everybody. Musicians, poets, dreamers, economists, teachers, care workers, evangelists, activists, entrepreneurs. I call you Generation Hope or Generation H. It's everybody. It's everyone from Greta all the way up to Prince Charles in England, the King, Prince Charles, soon to be the King of England, let's see. This is Generation Hope. And this is a transformation that we really need. And it is so exciting that we have future entrepreneurs in this program to start this journey. Anyway, I just wanted to kick things off with a bit of hope, a bit of positive vision for a future. I hope all the good ideas, all the vision that I laid forth in my little story there, I hope it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think we can do a lot better even than that, because 30 years is a long time. But all the signals are right, and there are 3 billion euros of capital. Raise your sail, take a piece of that, and you're going to live a wonderful life, a wonderful professional career in the next 30 years, and you'll do lots and lots of good. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Wallace, for a very inspiring presentation, and thank you for giving us a glance into the future. So, can I ask you a couple of questions from Slido?
Yes.
So, one question is, can you share some examples of your favorite sustainable startups at the moment?
Oh, yeah. This is an easy one. There's a company called Pacama. This guy named Diego Saez, he's from Argentina. He graduated from Y Combinator, well, gosh, it must be 2 years ago now. And he uses a combination of LiDAR technology, satellite technology, and drones to get a highly accurate estimate on carbon content in forests. Why? Because there's a big problem. We need to have, this carbon economy relies heavily on our ability to quantify and then trade carbon credits, because getting off of carbon is going to take a long time. So people who are still emitting carbon, they need to buy these credits. And I think he's just an amazing guy. I love the way he talks about relationship with Earth. He's coming from a place that's near the Amazon forest. To me, he's a climate hero, Pacama. I really like them. Another quick one, the Nori Carbon Marketplace. Really excited for what they're doing. They're based out of, it's either Seattle or Boulder, but it's a company that is using blockchain to create tradable carbon credits for farmers who are putting lots of carbon in their soil. So I really love that startup as well. I can go on and on, but maybe I better cap it at 2.
Yeah, that's great. And those kind of sound very futuristic at the moment.
Oh, this is real stuff. You know, this is not 30 years into the future. These guys are raising big, you know, there are companies that are literally reinventing food. I mean, we're seeing, you know, all of this emerge, but the guys out of Helsinki, Solar Foods, who are literally creating food proteins out of thin air. I mean, this stuff is almost magical. Yeah. And it's going to completely transform our food systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to see how it will impact our life.
But you know, I want to say to the people who are listening, this is not about unicorn building, folks. This is all hands on deck. So if you walk out your front door and you see that the plastic recycling bin is tipping over and stuff's blowing into the trees, you know what? Please be an activist. Call somebody at the city council. You know, write an email to the mayor and say, hey, buddy, I took some pictures. This stuff, either empty it more often, for God's sake, do something positive with it. If you need ideas, talk to Laima, you know, have an accelerator program. Let's figure out a solution to getting plastic managed better in the city. I think a lot of these actions have to happen at the community and municipal level. So everybody should not think you have to have deep science or technology to make the world a better place. It really starts from the ground up.
Yeah, indeed, small steps matter. And another question is, do you think separate countries and governments do enough to encourage businesses and individual creators to move towards sustainability?
Oh, thank you for, to the questioner for recognizing the elephant in the room. No, of course not. You know what? There are no easy answers there, but it's a valid question. The challenge here is the way we think about macroeconomics almost as a religion. I don't want to get too philosophical here, but we just need completely new ways of looking at the purpose of companies, the purpose of capital, and the purpose of human existence. Businesses. I don't want to go there, but a lot more needs to be done. Again, I'll say it. I'm really encouraged by Ursula von der Leyen and the narrative which is coming out of Brussels. I was talking behind the scenes before the show started with some of my fellow speakers. There's some really exciting leadership coming out of Lithuania in Brussels. Virginius and Laima, you please correct me on his last name or the pronunciation there, but you have good representation in Brussels, but clearly more needs to be done. Look, so many things have to happen at the same time. We need carrots and sticks from government. We need, consumer activism. If your grocery store is recreating a farmer's market environment inside their air conditioned and everything is wrapped in single-use plastic, be a Karen, ask to talk to the manager and say, look, I'm really unhappy with the greenwashing here. You say farmer's market in your newly renovated space, but everything is single-use plastic. What don't you understand about sustainability? This is not how I want to buy my produce. Everything small portion wrapped in plastic. So we need activism from boardrooms, down to people marching on the streets, and it's all hands on deck. So the winds of change, let the scorpions riff. The winds of change need to blow, and they need to be blowing from us. And innovators, you have a huge role to play, as do the accelerators and the investors. Everybody's got a role here.
True. So the last question, very short one. What is your advice for young entrepreneurs?
Oh, God. What I didn't say is 30 years ago, I didn't have a clue. And the world was not engineered so much for my success. My path was very simple 30 years ago. Get a job, get a mortgage, have a family, get 2 cars, enjoy 15 days of vacation a year, and save for retirement. This is the hero's journey, everyone. 30 years. If you're 20, you're at the very beginning of a huge wind blowing of change. It will pick you up no matter what you're doing. Just get in the game. Don't sit at home. Don't be passive. Be proactive, and you'll get caught up in something, and you'll have a great life. I graduated university into a recession. Was very grateful to even get a job. What am I saying? It got me to where I am. I'm extremely happy. But for people who are thinking about starting right now, there's so much support around you, advice, programs, grant money. The world is your oyster. So don't wait at home. Go out and do it. Even if it's something small, do something small. Make a movement in your neighborhood, and then convert it into some kind of a retail business or some kind of a consulting business. Let activism be the seed and grow businesses from there. I could talk an hour on this topic. I love these questions, by the way, but I think my time is probably over.
Yeah, thank you. Our time is up. So once again, thank you for taking time to join us here today. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And our next guest will continue the topic of sustainability. Sigita Žvirblytė is a sustainability manager at Vinted, the social marketplace for pre-loved clothing. Lithuania's first tech unicorn proved that focusing on creating a positive impact can help you win with purpose. So let's hear Sigita talk about how we can solve the biggest challenges of our generation. And do not forget that you can ask questions on Slido by entering the code FTPR2021. So please welcome Sigita with a big round of virtual applause.
O bus video? Supratau. Hi everyone. Sorry for a bit of a hiccup to start with. Thank you for having me. First of all, wow, what a speech, Wallace. Thank you. It's going to be hard to follow. It was very inspirational, very future-looking, and really very encouraging. I want to also thank the Futurepreneurs organizers, Julia, Laima, Victoria, for having me and the whole team. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for joining and listening to us. So as Julia mentioned, my name is Sigita. I'm the sustainability manager at Vinted, and I am here to talk about how to address the biggest challenges of our generation. Just to set a tiny bit of expectations, I'm not going to offer any solutions. These challenges are very grand scale. However, I'm going to try to offer a framework how you can think about it and talk about Vinted example. How do we build a purpose-driven business? And maybe that will give you some inspiration and ideas how to do it. So let me start, and let me start with the good news. So we all kind of gathered here to build purpose-driven businesses that would have an impact and some answers to the sustainable development goals, right? And the good news is the business is a way to provide a solution to a problem, of course, in exchange of money. And the good thing with the SDGs, as they are very clearly defined. There are really big problems that you can try solving on the local and the global scale. There are different solutions how you can approach them. You can approach them through technology, through innovation, but also kind of just solving allocation problems, connecting resources, sharing information and knowledge. So there's really a wide range of problems that invite wide range of the solutions. So definitely, when you ask a question, how can a business solve one of these, or what kind of problem should I solve, you have a list to choose from. Being invited to from the tech park, I wanted just to highlight as well the sustainable development goals that are expected to play a big part in these. And of course, it's nothing super new probably for all of you, but it is thinking about renewable energy, good jobs and economic growth, innovation and infrastructure, and partnerships. And I think the way when you think about any kind of goal that you try to address, it's really to think about what kind of solution can provide and how it touches other goals. So for example, with the renewable energy, it's not only going to be the renewable energy creation, it's also how do we store, how do we make sure that is available everywhere, how do we interconnect the grid lines, and what kind of sources can we use for it. For good jobs and economic growth, we know that there's a lot of promise in the innovation, new businesses, and of course the tech, but you have to ensure that this is going to be a bit different from some of the current businesses that we see that are really relying on the extractive economics, taking resources from countries that they don't have the legislation to protect their environment or societies, and kind of bringing the goods to the West where we can enjoy them, right? It's really thinking about the productive employment and decent work for all. When we think about innovation and infrastructure, we also have to think about not only inventing those links, but consciously thinking about what it would mean. So for example, now as a topic about machine learning and AI, there's a lot of discussion of unconscious bias that now are being built into the systems. So if we are going to build this infrastructure, we really have to think about it, what kind of negativities can come across them and can be kind of become as systematic problems later on. And of course, partnerships to achieve the goals are extremely important because, as Wallace mentioned, not one startup, whether it's a unicorn or a non-unicorn social enterprise, it's really not going to solve these massive global problems. And we need to partner up to create ecosystems to do so. So the bad news here, and I think the difficulty of these tasks is that now when we think about the market, externalities are still not priced right. So we do have a lot of funding from the governments and a lot of these great accelerators that are coming. But if we look at the market, kind of cost for our environment and cost to societies through health or time or happiness is really not accounted for. So let me explain this through an example that I borrowed from the IMF, and taking an example of the fuel, right, the gasoline. So as a customer, you have a car or a moped, you go to the gas station and you fill in your tank and pay a price. And let's say this price at the pump would be 80 cents per liter, right? However, there are not only the costs of extracting that fuel, as you're probably really well aware of, and transporting it to the gas station that gives access to you, but it also has costs for our society. So it creates a health costs because the burning of the fuel will create pollution, which is translated to tangible health costs. It creates congestion, so there are congestion costs, and of course it releases greenhouse gases. So it really adds to the problem of the climate change, right? And then we have a gap where sometimes governments are really supporting these businesses and subsidizing, as you see in the oil and gas industry. And these can come in from the pre-tax subsidy and then foregone VAT, which is still significant. So if you add all of these costs, it should be what it costs to extract the material, right, and to bring it to the customer, but also what actually the external cost it costs. So instead of paying 80 cents, the socially optimal price would be $1.50. And this is still a gap that we have to solve. I think this is where also the question of the elephant of the room, are the governments are doing enough? They do not. So this is where, and something that becomes a bit more difficult in some senses to build businesses that are really trying to build on sustainable goals that are financially sustainable as well. But of course, there's a lot of innovation that can happen, and there are loads of businesses that are really innovating to address these problems. So the challenge here is really you have big problems that you can really think of various solutions that can start at the local level, become global. It could stay in the local level that really contributes to these goals. However, finding a way of doing this and having a complexity of maximizing, right, the more than just the profit, but also the well-being of the society and the health of our ecosystems is really it adds that layer of complexity and the challenge. So let's really try to look into the fashion and the textile industry that Vinted is trying to disrupt. So let me speak a little bit about how we think about our business. And you know that you probably heard of Vinted as the first unicorn, and this is how we really became, I would say, famous. And while this is really, we appreciate and we're very grateful for having the luck to be a unicorn and to be the first unicorn, I think this is not Vinted's purpose, right? So the purpose of Vinted is really the environmental recovery, and how can we solve this? Kind of we are in the space of the fashion and textile industry. So let's start understanding a little bit about the problem, right? So some of these things will be not extremely new for you, but textile industry is extremely polluting. You probably have heard that it's number 2 or 3 most polluting industry after oil and gas. There are different accounts and different studies, but I think with the confidence we can say that it's a global top 5, definitely. If we think about the problems that it really creates in the current state of how it functions and production, it touches the biodiversity because there's a lot of, as you probably know, pesticides and insecticide use in the crops. And I just wanted to lift one fact that is related to cotton. And while cotton accounts only over 2% of the cropland, it is a super heavy user of the poison to poison the bugs. If we look at the chemicals, this is statistics from World Bank. They found that 20% of the wastewater worldwide comes from fabric drugs and its treatment. So it's definitely significant. It's like one liter out of 5 that we have in wastewater comes from this industry. For the climate, different accounts have different numbers, but it's around from 4 to 10% of global CO2 emissions is created in the supply chain of the textile industry. The waste and the complexity of textile recycling, we don't have a good innovation to still yet. Maybe that's an opportunity for you guys to find the textile to textile recycling. And this is usually ends up in the landfills, especially in the countries that don't have stringent waste management systems. So there's equivalent of garbage truck full of clothes going to the landfills every second. If we think about the water, the textile industry is very thirsty. So it competes really with other agriculture and food production, and it competes with the drinking water supplies, right? Especially that textile and the raw materials are really grown in the areas that are water sensitive, and it takes around 4% of global fresh water globally. And then of course there's a big social impact out of it. So we see that it really relies on a very vulnerable workforce. 80% of the workforce is women between 18 and 24 years old, and really this industry relying on the production in the countries where the policies are not as stringent as we have in West to protect really the health, the safety standards of these workers. So, okay, so we understand this problem. Okay, we can agree textile industry is really problematic, right? And especially how it is now. So how do we think about it as Vinted? And let me take example just of the climate, because it would be a bit long to explain all the verticals, but it will look very similarly. So if we look at the climate impact of the textile industry, we know that growing the raw materials creates the 38% of the CO2. The fabric production, where you really spin that raw material into yarn and produce a textile, it takes another 29% of the CO2. Garment production, where you sew the fabric, is 4%. Distribution, basically coming from the production sites to a customer, is around 6%. There is a 20% CO2 carbon footprint in actually used phase. So even if you don't think about this industry for your next accelerator at the Futurepreneurs, I think it's good to reflect at how we're taking care of our garments. Really, is that we do wash them in too high temperatures. We overwash the garments. We tend to dry them in our washing machines in some countries more than the others. But it's very energy intensive process that also uses a lot of water and chemicals. So being a bit conscious about it and thinking and kind of reading those little labels, right, on your clothes when you wash them, is a good indicator how the best to take care of a garment and save that energy. And then we have 3% in the landfill. So we have this supply chain, and kind of how can you address this? Of course, from the top, you can think about it. Okay, the reflection would be, okay, there's a lot in the production. How can we make the production better. You can think about regenerative resources that would replace the raw materials. You can think about recycling the textiles so that it would prevent prevent the need of growing the new raw materials, right? And it could go directly into fabric production. You can think about repairing your garments. So rather than throwing them away and recycling, you can repair, refurbish, or make something new out of it. And then it the textile that is already there can go into the garment production. Where Vinted comes in is in this reuse loop, really. It tries to capture the garments that are not needed or not used by the consumers and to loop back into the supply chain. So we're trying to skip the whole of the production part and just minimize it through distribution. And of course, the closest circle is the shared economy. So if you have clothes, it is the most effective ways that if you don't use them, really share it with your friends, with your relatives. This is the closest loop that really doesn't need that added CO2 through the distribution. And this is basically the circular economy, right, of the textiles. So, and while Vinted is really set now on this reuse loop, we are looking also in other business models. How can we make this circular economy really is happening? And I think one of the most important things is how do we create the circular ecosystem, right? So it doesn't have to be that Vinted would be in all of these loops. It could be that your new startup from the Futurepreneurs becomes the partners that we create this ecosystem of relooping all of the materials. If we think about how does this relate to the Sustainable Development Goals, Vinted being the core of a circular business, it's really innate to expect these results. But we have done a big survey looking at our negative impact and the positive impact that we replace the need of new garments. And we found that around 7 kilograms of CO2 is saved per transaction at Vinted. So it's really, people do replace the new purchases with their garments, and we have a climate positive impact. The same is to say for the water as well. We also see that we prolong the lifespan, so that would contribute to the reduction of the waste SDG. And then because of this prolongment of the lifetime and the less resources and needed to produce to have the same amount of garments in the circulation, you have the less competition for the land and the less pesticides use. So this is where the circular economy is really good. But I think you also have to think about that we're also building an innovation and what it really means to build this new infrastructure. So we have to think about how do we educate our customer, how do we build not only our own company, but the whole of the ecosystem that this replaces the linear fashion that we have. And we also have to think about that the jobs that Vinted creates, it's not exclusive, it's fair jobs that is well paid, and it really contributes to economy. So we try to really reflect on competitive salaries internally, but also to really think about the monies that our members can recapture from the garment that they sell. And it's really shift from valuing the garment that is new, so the creation of the garment where you buy it, to shift towards valuing the garment that is there, that's created, right? So it has intrinsic value. It doesn't lose its value when you purchase it. It's still there. And you can recapture this through circular models. So my advice would be is to really think about the problem you are solving. So what kind of supply chain it has, where do these problems really appear, and where it is the heaviest ones, right? You can choose also to really zoom in into one aspect and solve that. It doesn't have to be addressing the biggest ones, and then to think about how do I collaborate with other ecosystem players to build up this sustainable ecosystem. And then really, when you're reflecting on sustainable development goals, really reflect on your supply chain. So it might be that something that will come intrinsically to your business startup. So you can, right, work on with the bacteria that eats up a plastic. That is a new discovery, right? And it can seem to be, oh, it's very easy because it's intrinsically addressing one of the goals, but really to think about where it has the touch points and where your company has to take an extra action to make sure that is holistically sustainable. Yes, so this was my presentation. Thank you for listening so much. I hope there's a bit of a inspiration from what I shared, and I am ready for questions.
Thank you, Sigita. Thank you for a very interesting presentation and really in-depth examples. And yes, there are some questions for you, so if you're ready.
Yes.
So the first one is very easy. What do you like the most in your job?
Wow, I think it's the meaning that I get from the job. So I had a bit of a shift in kind of my life plan and what I'm gonna do in my work quite early on in my career. I really thought I'm gonna go into investment banking and I'm gonna be the smart rich person, and then it kind of changed. I really thought about that it really doesn't matter, right? That the money will not make you happy, and the work that you do is really that you spend so much time on. The meaning that you get from it is much more important. So it's really kind of feeling that it's not only the work that I like and the colleagues that I like, but that the company that we're building and the agenda that I'm driving is really meaningful and has a bigger picture than just creating wealth for the shareholders, which is important, but it's one of the stakeholders, right?
Yeah, we usually hear this from people working in the sustainable startups and bigger companies. So another question is, you talked a lot about the problems caused by fast fashion, and do you really think that we can solve these problems? And I would like to add on this, when we can solve them.
So definitely we can solve them. I think it takes a new way of thinking how we do the business. So I think it's important that the businesses, more and more businesses would become a purpose-driven business that maximizes not only the profits and minimizes the costs. It's really thinking about longevity and the impact on the societies and the ecology. How I see the future, if I can think what Wallace presented, and how I see the future of fashion, that is a tiny bit going to be like what we see with the car industry, right? So now we're going into re-commerce of clothes that is being normalized, that is kind of shedding this non-prestigious label that for some reason it had, and it's really becoming mainstream. But I think other circular models such as rental and repair, which really dropped during the latest years, will really come back. And you would have in your wardrobe a few clothes that you keep and it's your own and you own, but then you would engage through the re-commerce rental models to have to engage in the shared economy of goods. So then you minimize the amount of clothes that you actually own, but you don't limit the access to outfits that you have. And if we value the product that is not kind of at the creation, right, that we price it only when there is transaction of it being new, but you value a product as it is, there's going to be a pressure for better and better quality of garments, right? So for you to engage in circular economy, the garment has the biggest value that lasts the longest, and it can be the physical longevity, right, of the garment, that it doesn't kind of have holes in it, and it could be emotional longevity, right, that it's not something that is popular for one day and it's like fashionable and then it's not fashion. So it's going to be a bit more about the style, right? So this is, I think, kind of with this shift in in the trends, this kind of slower production of the goods will appear, but our consumer habits really will shift into the circular economy.
Yeah, and adding to this question is another one. Vinted was started in 2008, I believe, and what we are talking about changing the shifting and so on, that wasn't the reality back then. So people are interested how Vinted started to attract customers and to change their point of view at that point.
Yeah, so when it was started from like a very tangible problem, right? It started with our founder was moving and she had a lot of clothes she wasn't wearing and she didn't want to move to a new place with all these kind of unused items, right? So this is how it really started. Is kind of how do I share these clothes that are good and usable, but I'm not the one to use them anymore. So so there has been a bit of a shift in normalizing. I think there's a lot of as well to do with people having how they understand the ownership and how they view the product. It's a bit maybe philosophical, but we see as well that this is kind of understanding. It's becoming more and more important, understanding where your clothes are coming from and the brand that you're purchasing it from. What values does it have, so that your outfit will represent yourself as well. And I think this is a mixture of just more information and understanding and people being aware of these problems, but also it's really different way of thinking about the product, right? Because with Lithuanian history, there's a lot of history of scarcity that the only way to know that you will have access to a thing is to own it. That has been left through for us after the Soviet Union collapsed, and it's really shifting because you know that the market can kind of ensure that those goods will be available for you, so you don't have to kind of accumulate it and sometimes like hoard it to really enjoy it and have opportunity to have access to them.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we can sum up this by saying that if Vinted managed to start a sustainable business back then, when there was no trends related to sustainability, our young entrepreneurs can do it now with all the possibilities around them. So Sigita, thank you. Thank you once again. Our time is up, but I hope to see you again soon and hopefully in reality.
Yes, exactly. It's super nice to talk to you guys. I hope to interact more with you and ask me questions offline as well. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think this is very inspirational what you're doing, and hopefully there are going to be great new startups coming out of this program. So Good luck.
Thank you. So last but not least, let's talk about money. So while there are many businesses based on good ideas with a lot of potential, some still struggles to attract money. So investors and startup founders will share their personal experience and practical tips on how to attract investment for impact-driven businesses in the upcoming discussion. Do not forget to ask your questions on slido.com by entering the code FTPR2021. Now put your hands together for the panel discussion powered by CoInvest Capital.
Good afternoon, everyone, and especially my colleagues today who are joining our short panel discussion. So thank you, Rita, Sandra, and Simonas for being here. I hope that your insights as founders and investor will be useful for our today's audience, because we will talk more about the investments and we'll touch sustainability theme a little bit. So Rita, I will start with you because I've just recalled the last year's Futurepreneurs launch day in which you had participated, and talked a lot about business angels investments and value added for the startups. And you've mentioned that business angels are the best as first investors in the company because they have connections and they are well known in the market. So during 2020, you've made a few investments, and maybe during this time you've noticed any changes in that field?
Hi, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to your session. It's always nice to be at Futurepreneurs, only a little bit differently this year. It feels like we're really in the future now. You know, I think not a lot changed in terms of, you know, the why I'm investing in companies and when I'm investing in companies, I think. And I think that's true for many business angels. But I think the where has changed in 2020. And that's because, you know, the world has become ironically smaller. You know, I'm now looking at pitches from Bay City angels in that, you know, that are supported by Bay City angels in San Francisco on a monthly basis because, you know, by Zoom, by the power of Zoom, we don't have to be there in person anymore. And, you know, it's no longer a stigma. I think before we used to think, oh, no, if I don't meet the company in person, then we'll never invest. So I think that the where has definitely changed in 2020. You know, I think it's important to understand what business angels look for. And I don't think that that's changed. You know, we look for quality, passion, commitment in the founders. You know, we look for integrity in the founders as well. And, you know, of course, there has to be interesting technology or IP. You have to have a market. You have to know your sales strategy. You know, there are certain basics that of course haven't changed just because of the pandemic. I think that those basics still remain very true.
Mm-hmm. And while working with the business angels, I've noticed that they are quite open-minded and can make a decision to invest really fast. And what is your experience? How quick you can decide to make an investment? And what are the most important things you take into account during the negotiations regarding the investment terms? Is sustainability in the priority list?
Of course, I think sustainability now is more and more in the priority list for angels, but of course not always. It depends. You know, I mean, there are many different angels, many different ideas, and angels jump in at different points. It's not a science, it's an art. So I would think, you know, if you can convince angel investors of your market, of the need for what it is that you're doing, and of course, if there's sustainability in the mix, then, you know, that makes your chances of being funded all that much higher. You know, having said that, there are many reasons why angels don't invest as well. I think, you know, there's a bit of a misconception with, you know, founders who are starting their companies and you know, coming in and pitching and they kind of tend to think that they'll find someone the first time. It's not always the case. And you have to be super, super persistent. It's really tough to get funded. And, you know, once an angel does decide to go ahead and fund, the term sheet is a very important aspect, of course, as you mentioned. And, you know, the term sheet is important because, you know, you need to understand what this is going to look like, what this relationship is going to look like, and be very clear about that so that there are no misconceptions. I mean, I like to go out in the world and think everybody's great and you know, everybody thinks the same way and, you know, we're all just kumbaya, but that's not the way it is oftentimes. And, you know, maybe not for dark reasons, but, you know, for a variety of reasons, we see the world differently. And that has to be put down on paper so that the expectations are very, very clear. And it leaves little for disappointment, let's say. You know, having said that, I'd like to make note of this idea of angels coming in very early. I think, you know, it's bootstrapping is a phenomenal concept. And, you know, that is basically where the founders show that they have skin in the game as well, and they're willing to take a risk. investing in a startup is super risky business. And, you know, I think the statistic is still 90% fail. And you know, having said that, angels are really, really risking a lot by investing in a startup. So if we see that founders are bootstrapping and using either their own cash or something, you know, from early sales to get the company going, we love to see that. And there are great examples. One of the top entrepreneurs that I've been in love with for years is a woman called Sarah Blakely. And she started her company in 2000 with $5,000. And that company is called Spanx. Of course, the men probably won't know about this, but Spanx is kind of this, you know, fabulous underwear that makes everyone look glamorous because it squeezes you in all the right places. And, you know, it's now, you know, a billion-dollar company, and she is worth over $1 billion. She's one of the wealthiest women, you know, probably on the planet. I don't know. They call her self-made. And that's an interesting concept as well, because I think, you know, self-made, nobody's really self-made. We all rely on other people. We all rely on relationships. You know, so I think, you know, teams are very important and yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Rita. It's interesting. Now I'll move to our founders, whose experience I have no doubt is really valuable for the audience. So I'll start with Sandra. We, alongside your colleagues, Aquila and Danute, have precisely met a year ago in a cafe, and we had a conversation, agreed on some homework, plans, and quarantine happened. Our second meeting has been already online. What do you think, in your opinion, would the fundraising process be smoother if we have done this in person? Were you prepared for such a process?
Thank you very much for having me here, first of all. From co-founder side, so raising capital, even in good times, is already hard enough. So yes, capitalizing on the idea to raise money in a pandemic or crisis period seemed like impossible for us at first. So when the first wave of pandemic hit, this was in March. So we were already ready with our pitch decks and already about to reach out to our angel or investors or funds. And then, yeah, we had a bit of depression within the team. But then in the process, we realized that every crisis can actually bring new, unique opportunities. And some of them was touched by Rita already. So fundraising as well. So we found out that investors, even with a more careful approach, but they were quite optimistic about the future. That's surprising, right? And also investors were far more reachable to get them on a Skype, on Hangouts, and etc. instead of personal meetings. So which was a huge bonus for us as a co-founders. Also, of course, there were so much harder to build a true relationship with them because, you know, to show our enthusiasm or drive, you know, for the idea via video calls instead of personal meetings. So we had to sweat a bit to transfer not only the physics, numbers, slides, but also our attitude and chemistry, as I say. And also at the end of the day, how you show up and how you deal with the crisis. I think that's also very important because that's allow your investors to judge how you would react, you know, in reality before they invest into you.
Thank you, Sandra. And Simonas, your story is quite different because you successfully closed the investment round just before the lockdown. And looks like everything should have been okay, but everything was closed during the busiest time for the startup, I think, product development and go-to-market stages. How the real-life process differs from the one you have planned? What were the unexpected things? Maybe you have some advice and tricks for those entrepreneurs who think that if you have a good idea and implementation plan, it's just easy to start your business.
Hey everybody, thank you for this opportunity to take part in this great discussion. So actually, formally, we have closed the round already at the beginning of pandemic. And you can imagine that moment when a very late stage of negotiations and pandemic hit. Borders closed, people are working from home, supply chain crashed, and supply chain crashed for, as we are a tech business, it's a really big issue for us. And nobody knows how the world will proceed in the future. But I believe it's a story not only of us, but it's a story of everybody. And obviously, at that moment, we received an invitation from our investors, from venture capital funds and business angels to talk about strategy and how we see the current situation and the circumstances we are in. And, energy tech is a question of upcoming decades, not a question of upcoming months or upcoming few years. And sustainability is a key we need to follow in order to prevent similar situations as we have today with COVID-19 in the future. So we encouraged our investors to see this situation as an opportunity to get closer to some of our competitors. Therefore, we successfully closed the round at the beginning of mid of March. And of course, as Victoria, you mentioned, there are some struggles in supply chain and sales, but it's not only our problem. It's a very important message. It's a problem of of everybody. It's a global problem. But once again, pandemic will end and we'll come back to normal life. And this world will be rebuilt, we believe, in sustainable way. And we have great examples. For example, 5-6 months ago, Mr. Macron announced 8 billion euro support plan for local automakers of France. And he said on his speech that every single euro should be used to build a new France with new technologies in a new sustainable way. Even more, European Union wants to become CO2 neutral already in less than 30 years. So our clients also see charging stations that Imbalance produce, not a question of upcoming months, but a question of upcoming few years and decades. That makes them confident to proceed. And talking about my advices, about force majeure situations. So my advice would be always ready to update your plan. If you're a tech business, you need to create a stable supply chain of components. Find 3-4 different suppliers for a single component. Order and receive strategic stock. And always follow your competitors on social media, especially big ones. Since we are big, they have enough money to spend on analytics. And from their moves, you can predict how market will move and change.
And Simonas, apparently I will not reveal any secret that you plan to raise additional funds for further product development in the nearest future. Which mistakes you intend not to make in attracting the following investment?
Yeah, it's a very good question, but I would move, to that side, that it is not mainly what we will do differently, but more what mistakes we made during the first round, because it's lessons we learned. So it's very important to clarify scope, what you want to receive with specific funding. Since we changed our scope a few times on the very late stage, and it's really annoying and it's really stressful, and investors, angels and VC funds wants to receive information as soon as possible. But the most important advice from my side would be what we learned, that it's really important to invest to your team. If you want to succeed, you need, first of all, to spread your idea on your team, with your team, core team, not with your customers, since that team will help you to reach all the goals. And 1 year ago, we believed that we 3 co-founders would be able to keep the speed and sharp mind by working 24/7. And that was a big mistake. And now, going to another round, we're really spending more time and great time with our team while discussing our strategy and how everybody could take part in that strategy. You know, competition in tech business is like a marathon and very long distance in which you need to strategically plan your speed. I believe that's about it.
Thank you. Sandra, we speak at a Futurepreneurs event that focuses on creating and developing sustainable business. In your opinion, to what extent the fact that your business is sustainable has helped you to attract investment, or was it due to other components after all? What do you think?
That's a great question. And we actually felt within the team that, especially during the crisis and during the pandemic, consumers and increasingly more investors as well, they tended to reward companies by saying reward, I mean invest or consume or just take a look at them. The ones that have already social angle, because, you know, as everybody told today here, it's the future. So, and if you have that beautiful mission for your company, as everybody said, you have to have a spirit within the team, but also you have to find investors who truly believe as well in sustainability. And that's actually like additional and entirely new challenge and new task for co-founders. And it's kind of hard to find and to align those values between the whole accounts. But having a great business idea or a great mission is great, but it's not sufficient. And as most experienced investors know, success is as much about the team as it is about the mission, the business idea or opportunity. So team, I'd say, is the ultimate success for all the projects. And we actually, all of our investors, we have 4 business angel and 1 fund, which is CoInvest fund. Everybody said aligned opinion that team was actually beside the idea, which is nice and great. Team was the key factor for investing.
Yeah, and it was, and it is. So you think that the fact that your business contributes to sustainability during this pandemic has helped you, or has just been a shortcoming?
I think COVID-19 pandemic in general, it has just accelerated all the business industry trends that was before pandemic already. So shopping, shifting to digital channels, and consumers continuing to demand brands for social justice. So us being direct to consumer focused and us being digital first and sustainable fashion business, this actually was a huge advantage for us in the pandemic. This gave us ability and flexibility to adapt to challenges and just, for example, to quickly change our markets to the ones that were less affected by COVID. We felt that our clients and other partners increasingly asking for our transparency and sustainability first, and giving us applause because we respect our workers, we are sustainable, ethical producers. So this became really a big advantage for us. So in a broad scheme of things, yes, I'd say pandemic helped us grow even more, but also there were parts of business like B2B side, business to business side, that were affected on a negative way, but we only had only a few percentage of our business in B2B, but loads of standard fashion business companies, the ones selling only on retail, they went bankrupt. So for us, it was a positive side, but.
Okay. And Rita, the last question. You have already mentioned a bit, but please share more with us and with the audience. What mistakes do companies make when looking for financing and also when getting it? Just share with us your experience from the investor side.
Yeah, good question, because I think that it's something that maybe founders don't really consider when they start. Fundraising is a very long process. You know, you really have to be able to be persistent, be able to hear the answer no many times, because you will. And even if it's a no, you got to still be persistent to be able to, you know, think about maybe you'll make it a yes and know what the difference is between the hard no's, the maybe no's, the no no's. Let's see, you know, I think one of the issues is not knowing how much money you need. not knowing how you're going to be using the money, not being able to tell your angels, business angels who might be contemplating investing, not showing them your plan A, B, C, and D. I mean, contingency planning has become increasingly important, and this pandemic has certainly shown it. Both Similas and Sandra have touched on that as well. You know, and then I think once you do get funded, I think, you know, the problem is how you're going to use the cash. How diligent are you in hiring your team? How diligent are you in firing your team? Because you can burn through cash very quickly. And if you see that you have people on your, you know, in your company that, you know, aren't pulling their weight or are the wrong fit, you got to make that decision fast as well. So I think that there are a lot of, you know, I mean, it's cold, maybe it's calculating, but at the end of the day, you know, you're burning through cash every single month. And every single month that you burn through cash and don't make money, it's, you know, one step closer to, unfortunately, the end. So, you know, angels want to make sure that you don't reach that end. And that's why, you know, sometimes for founders, it seems like, oh, these angels are asking me for reporting and this and that. But you really need to be, to maintain good financial reporting and in general, hygiene from that perspective, you know, once a month, you know, maintaining, looking at your numbers, understanding what your forecasting is, and so on. I mean, just because it's a startup, and, you know, it seems like, you know, the world is your oyster and you're running after these huge billion-dollar markets and so on and so forth, and you're going to scale and this, you still need a plan, and you still need to follow rules of reporting generally.
Can't agree more. So thank you, everyone. Good luck with your sustainable businesses and investments. And I think we have some questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your discussion. It was very insightful. And actually, you answered some of the questions asked already. So let's finish the discussion with a couple of short ones. So the first question would be for the investors, so for Victoria as well and Rita. Do you have a business type or the industry sector that you prefer when you are investing? And does the fact that business is sustainable really affect the decision making? So maybe Victoria, we can start from you.
Yes. We are generalistic fund. Co-investment fund invests in every sector and in every field. But yes, we have, you know, additional value for those companies who are creating, which are creating sustainable business and are creating really products which is needed in the market. So it's a medtech, it's artificial intelligence, etc. But also we are looking at traditional businesses also.
Thanks, Rita.
So yeah, from the business angel perspective, you know, as I mentioned, it's a very risky personal investment. You're investing your own cash. So, you know, you have to really look at not boxing yourself in. And though, again, you know, not everybody's different, but I would say angels try to diversify. So, you know, they're not really in one particular area. It would be very, very risky to do so. So they may not necessarily be experts in the field that they're investing in. They may have some investments where they're, you know, experts and they can really help the company, help drive the company. But having said that, just because an angel is not, you know, let's say a doctor investing in med tech, angels still come to the table with contacts, experience, life experience. They motivate. They're your biggest cheerleaders. You know, they spread the word through networking. And, you know, they really need to know, they don't need to know, let's say, the nitty gritty of the company, but they need to understand, obviously, what they're investing in. But, you know, I think ultimately, good angels are there to open doors for these companies as well. And it's a, you know, win-win situation. You know, we want the companies to win just as much as the companies want to win. So hope I answered.
Yeah, thank you. That's great to hear. And another question is for the entrepreneurs. So the question is about employee versus startup founder. Simonas has already mentioned that it's a hard and stressful process of having and running the startup. So what would be your main arguments to still do it and to found a startup and run it? So maybe Sandra, we can start from you.
That's a great question. First of all, you have to have cash, not burned yet, to hire new, or unless you have a revenue stream already coming. Yeah, I totally agree that you have to have a team, especially for the ones like customer support, technical stuff. So just not to overload co-founders' head, and to keep a space for really strategic stuff. So yeah, not sure if this answered a question, but if you have a chance, it's always have to have inside professionals, the ones, and always a case to have like internal competence you need versus external like agents and etc. So it's always a plus if you have a cash or a fund to recruit people and have competences inside the team.
Yeah, thank you. And Simonas, what would you like to add?
Only a few things, I think so. But tech business where we are working in requires different professionals, different skills, and it's really important to have those skills on board, since we are competing with the whole world, and everyone is moving forward with their technologies, with their know-how, and etc. So we need, if you want to succeed, we need to have a edge, and when I'm talking about edge, I mean by technological edge. So to have this, you need to have a really wide range of different professionals that would share their know-how while creating the product.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's finish with this note. Thank you once again for joining this discussion and sharing your tips and insights. It was very interesting to hear, and I think it's very important to hear from the people who've done this. So thank you once again. And so what we have heard today, first, focusing on impact is a winning strategy for business. Second, we still have many things to do to create a better world. And third, there are organizations, investors, and funds who want this change to happen. So let's create impact-driven business. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today for our launch day event. And please follow our news on Facebook. There are more events coming your way. Have a nice day and see you soon.